Hello, hello. Nice to be with everyone today, and a warm welcome to my my friend Michael, who's here from Fordham University, although probably not in real life. I don't know, is that a real life room or
That's a
it's a
real
real
life.
life Fordham
That's a real
University?
life.
Great. Hang on, I'm just fixing my screen here. Bear with me one second. I'm sure there's still some people coming in. We had a large RSVP, and it looks like people are a little bit late today. I always like to invite people to turn their cameras on if they can, if they're not in a place that they can't. It makes it more enjoyable for our guest, in this case, Michael, but also for me to see your faces. And please go ahead and share in the chat where you're calling in from. I want to thank Jack today for playing co-pilot for us. Maybe a new face to some of you, and I'm here to do the introductions on my own. So wish me luck. It's usually above my pay grade, but Michael's an old friend. We're fellow Club of Rome members, which I'm pretty sure is where we must have met initially. Michael's a management professor at Fordham Business School. And the truth is, ever since I've known Michael and his work, and I recall being at a conference that he organized somewhere years ago, I've always been wrestling to understand how to integrate his work on humanistic management with my work on regenerative economics, knowing that there was a thread there to tug on, but it was a little bit tricky for me to figure it out. And we were together last fall, and kind of I re-energized my desire to do that, and it all of a sudden became clear to me, and hopefully that'll become clear to all of you today. So, without further ado, welcome, Michael. Uh,
Thank you for
this this
having
is
me.
our monthly open discovery dialogue, and just a little bit more formal introduction. Michael's a professor at Fordham, as I mentioned. He's the author of a book called Humanistic Management: Protecting Dignity and Promoting Well-Being. But he's also the president of the International Humanistic Management Association and the editor-in-chief of the Humanistic Management Journal. So this humanistic management is officially a thing, and Michael is clearly at the forefront of creating this, turning this into a thing within the academic profession in the business school academy. And so, anyway, Michael, thanks for joining us. And maybe to kick it off, what the hell is humanistic management, and why do we need it?
Well, thanks, John. Thanks, everybody, for being here. What the hell is humanistic management? It is a framing and a language, a verbiage to distinguish it from the traditional way we manage. And I think when you think about management, when you ask people when they have any idea, it's typically command and control. Somebody that's in charge and will tell you what to do, and they have somehow have to be superior to you in at least skill, but oftentimes in human value, like they are better than. And then oftentimes when you experience organizations that have that kind of approach, people are disenchanted, to say the least, if not angry, resentful, or disengaged. And I would say that the state of the world is one where you could use better management. And we just say humanistic management is a way to frame it and potentially start a conversation. I'm not going to say it's the most effective, but you've seen so many other ways that are qualifiers like regenerative economics, conscious capitalism, all of these
Mhm.
adjectivized versions of something that exist, but we want it to be different. So in some way, I think
It's
we're sort
true.
of on a similar path to sort of say, hey, there are many options, different possibilities that we want to open up for the moral imagination, for the human imagination, for us to consider that there are better ways, different ways, and we're not doomed by, I think, what people call reality. And it's not
Mm,
reality, right? But it's something that we have
mm,
accepted collectively. And so for us, humanistic management is simply the protection of dignity, which is inherent value, and the promotion of human and planetary flourishing, if you want to say it.
mm,
In
Good.
more traditional terms, it could be well-being.
Yeah, and we'll dig into those in a second. But as I was learning more about this, it actually parallels my work. What I think it'd be fair to say, there's this management theory or framework called Taylorism for Winslow Taylor, which is kind of the neoclassical economics of management, right? And in my course, I explained that its roots are the same. It was, in the case of economics, a group of economists trying to make economics a science, just like Newton's physics. And if literally you read the language of Taylor, I have this quote that I share in the course, to make management a science, da 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 da. And so the the source of the problem is the same, which is this reductionist way of seeing the world. In my case, applied to economics, and in your case, applied to management. And and so I guess what I was confused about initially with the term humanistic is it seems anthropocentric, whereas my work is trying to move away from anthropocentric and see humans embedded in society. But as I learn more about your work, I actually think it ends up being in the same place. But you just named like the two pillars of your work. So let's double click on that a little bit, and talk about actually before we go into the dignity and the
Mm.
well-being. I was joking with you at the beginning. I asked you if you had studied philosophy, and and it seems that your work is rooted in a philosophical foundation, which I'd love you to talk about a little bit, because in the context of business and a business school, to be accused of being a philosopher is about as bad as it can get. And yet, we're at this moment where a little more, I would argue, a little more philosophy is actually exactly what the doctor ordered. But talk about your background and how you bring philosophy into your work as a leadership management professor.
Yeah, maybe let me reframe this, and thanks for the question. I think I'm what we would call sort of interested in a phenomenon. And the phenomenon is who are we and how can we actually achieve the kind of things that we're interested in achieving, which for most people is happiness and well-being, right? So this doesn't take philosophy. This just takes some kind of observation and listening to self and others. But then to explain why we're not organizing for flourishing or well-being, you have to unpack it through different ways. And one way, of course, is the philosophy. Like you mentioned, like where is it coming from? Where's our thinking coming from that we now assume this is the way to manage and organize? And I would say management, we typically say, is the capital M management. It's the management of everything, including our lives and society. It's not just business and organizations, right? So there must be some kind of embeddedness around like what are the big thinkers and people dedicated to humanity saying about those existential questions, like E.O. Wilson would say, who are we? What do we want? Where are we going? And I think that's management. Those are managerial questions. Philosophy has an answer to that. So does evolutionary psychology, evolution biology, and all of those other disciplines at the university. So I'm considering myself oriented towards explaining that phenomenon, and therefore I use whatever is helpful, including psychology, including philosophy,
Mhm.
et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And
And s- and the basic, it seems to me the basic idea that you begin with to reject is the unquestioned assumption in both economics and management that humans are these, profit maximizing utilitarian things that, all they want is basically money to buy stuff, material stuff, and to work as few of hours as possible under the easiest conditions possible to get the most stuff they can get. That's sort of the foundation assumption. which in economics, literally, I don't think I've shared this with you, but literally, Irving Fisher took Newton's equations and he equated a particle in physics to an individual in economics, and he equated work in physics to disutility in economics. So the whole thing is set up that, we're essentially, interchangeable particles that need to get stuff, so they work if they have to. But there's nothing alive about it, or connected about it, or relational about it, or humanistic about it at all. We're just cogs in a machine, and the whole logic is a machine. So you're rejecting that, and it seems to me you're drawing on all sources, as you say, of what we know it means to be human, what we care about as humans. And is that now like, are you an outsider in the business school, and people think you're this sort of fluffy, woo-woo, soft stuff, love and cuddling guy? Because I went onto the journal's website, and there's a
Mhm.
bunch of articles that have the word love in the title.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Uh,
yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, I actually don't know what people think,
they
but
don't tell you.
I'm also not super interested, honestly. Or there's all kinds of things probably, but
Yeah,
yes, it is. Well, here's the thing. What turns out to be actually very powerful is that all that we're talking about, you and I, and probably everybody here, is actually much better, much more rooted in actual science. So it's better from a scientific perspective, and turns out it's actually way superior in practice. So it's not
right,
like woo woo or any of these kind of things. It's actually better on pretty much every dimension we know. It's better for people, it's better for managing results, for performance, for the environment, for society.
right,
So it's like almost like, duh, this is not woo woo. This is just like, it's stupid if you
right,
don't do
right,
it yourself.
right.
Whatever
And you
whatever framing you want to use for yourself, that works.
and you've been able to measure that empirically? Not that I want to get into that, but
Yeah,
just
yeah,
to
we have done
understand what you
that, but
mean.
I think there is so much evidence out there that you don't even have to do it. You just have to look for it.
Yeah,
And I
yeah,
mean, just some of the management classics, for example, Good to Great, or some others, just that they point to the same thing. If you want to have
yeah,
excellence in organizations, you got to have some way of managing for more than utility, or utility, let's say, understood as just monetary or material stuff, right? You need
right.
to have a higher purpose. You need to organize for something that actually generates life, or that's regenerative, as you would say, right? All
Yeah,
those
yeah,
principles, when in play, they give life to life. And that's what
right,
people want. That's what people
right.
resonate with. You don't have to even make an argument. That's the problem, I think, is that we tacitly get it, we intuitively understand it, and therefore we oftentimes dismiss that inner wisdom and insight, and we say, no, that's not real. We have to become XYZ,
Mm,
educated to understand all of these fancy things. When in fact, if you listened a little bit more carefully to your intuition, you probably
mm,
get some of those basic principles that life has in store,
mm,
if you were attuned more, right? And I think that's where everybody is right now in many ways in this world, shocked by these sort of life destructive, extractive approaches
mm.
that we have legitimized, right? We have
Yeah.
legitimized it. The university as such has legitimized this kind of destruction. And
But
that's
just
very sad.
like, on that, then, I mean, has the Business Academy ever come out and said Taylorism is wrong? This is stupid.
So
Don't.
many books. There's so many books that have said that, so many scholars that have won awards that have said this, so many Nobel prizes that have sort of proven that all of that is not correct, right? But the question is like, why is it sticky?
Yeah.
Why is it still around? Why is it that people appreciate that kind of thinking? It gives certainty, it is simple,
Mm,
right? And it explains part of the world for sure.
yeah.
But it's
Yeah.
making the mistake that
The
it's
the
taking
classic partial
apart.
truth, the
Yes,
dangerous partial truth. Yeah. Yeah.
exactly.
All right. So let's drill down and just
Mm.
understand this a little better because the beauty of your framework is we only have to understand two things,
Right.
dignity and well-being. So let's tackle each of those. And dignity for me, it's such an interesting and again, like you said, obvious. Like I don't know if I've ever heard the term dignity elevated to primary importance
Mm.
in the world of business
Hmm.
and certainly in the world of finance. But tell us about dignity. Like there's a theory of dignity. So give us a quick tutorial on dignity.
So I think the easiest way to understand it, it's dignity is inherent value. You don't create it, right? We talk about value creation all the time. No, no. Dignity is representative of the value that exists already. So you can protect it. It's your inherent unconditional value as a human being, but it could be the inherent value of life. It could be the inherent value of the environment, or all that provides value to human beings to be alive. That could be abstract concepts like marriage or something for some people has inherent value, right? So it's just a category that we typically don't think about because in terms of finance, economics, we think about commodity or price. And the mechanism that dominates the market is price, and it works. That's great. It works for some things, right? For those that
Mhm.
are conditionally valuable, not unconditionally. So if you have a theory that focuses only on price, you neglect those parts that are essential to life. And I think all the pop songs, not all, but many pop songs, many speeches that we refer to are pointing to that. Even some of the best ads, like MasterCard, is like saying, "Oh, for the real things that we value in life, it's there's you can't pay for them. But for everything else,
Mm.
there is this card that you can use." So we intuitively know that there's so many things in life that we actually cherish in and of themselves. And that's the categorization. Kant sort of is the most famous to give this categorization and distinction. And so if you take this a little bit logically further, you can actually say it's a foundational principle equal to utility or superior to utility. Because utility is the kind of exchange mechanism. And I'm just arguing, like, if we have a lens that allows for dignity to be of equal or maybe superior importance as a first principle of organizing that which is inherently valuable, then you have a different set of options on how to organize. And after the World War II, maybe the most important example that people can relate to, and some of you I know are in that field of human rights, we developed
Mm.
human rights, but the human rights codification and justification comes out of dignity, comes out of the assumption of, no matter who you are as a human being, you are valuable, and you have certain rights accorded as a consequence of that dignity, right? And you have many of the religious and spiritual traditions speak to that. That's actually one of the foundations that Hans Küng, a theologian who studied all of the global religions, sort of says that we have this principle of humanity that can translate into dignity. So it's a source of universalism, right? Whereas the neoliberal
Who
one,
is it that you just who studied that you just said?
Hans Küng, he was a theologian that we worked with, and a Swiss theologian.
Uh, and so it would seem to me then that dignity is priceless. You can't
Exactly.
put it into a market system.
Exactly. It escapes the logic of the market, right? And if you look at the world, all the problems that we have, while we have markets and established markets and want to make organizations like markets, and that's sort of the trajectory, is like the ideal solution for every human problem is create a market, even in economics, price the environment, price this, price that. That logic actually undermines that which gives life.
Right.
And it can be helpful. I'm not going to dispute that sometimes market pricing can be
Yeah.
helpful, but it needs to
Yeah.
be in the context of, all right, protect that which already is valuable.
So you would agree, I think, that a human has dignity, that a human's dignity is a sacred right.
Well, I
It's
mean, we can debate if we want to get into the rights conversation, but that has happened, right? That is sort of something that we already see and we can refer to, that people have said, because we want to protect our sacrality or inherent value,
right.
we are going to give us rights, right? And have a legal system that will protect that. And that's what we have done, right? And that's pretty much also the logic that drives the Sustainable Development Goals, the United Nations, and all of those
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
non-economistic approach.
But it seems I'll draw on Mark Carney's speech. It seems like it's a we're all putting a sign in the window pretending we agree with that or we honor that, but we don't every day, all day long. I mean, if we actually agreed with that in the business world, we wouldn't allow Zuckerberg to destroy our children's mental health.
Yes, I agree. And the problem that we have is we always need to make a business case for not destroying the kids' mental health, or that we have to develop character, or all the things that we actually intrinsically value.
Hmm.
We now have to fit into the logic of the market.
Right.
And you see people make the business case for responsibility, business case for the
Right.
environment, business case for everything. It's like,
Yeah.
this is the wrong way to think about it.
Exactly. Exactly.
But we are in cahoots with this kind of thinking because we're not pushing forward an alternative, superior way. That's what I would argue.
Yeah, but if we have to if the debate is held within the context of a market economy, then you've already lost. You can't win that debate within the framing of a market-based, price-driven economy. It's the same conversation that we're having about putting a price on nature and putting nature on the balance sheet. It's a and so how do you? I mean, it's a profound pillar of this, but it's a like like we can spend the rest of our lifetime just talking about how we actually affect that pillar in the real world. When, I can see a CEO embracing humanistic management, rah, 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 and still having a business model that extracts and is violent to human and non-human dignity. And it's just sort of we look the other way. It's too profitable to not do that.
Well, I let me just sort of play, I don't know, the angel's advocate here. Not the devil's advocate, but it's like, I'm not sure that we are that doomed, right? I think that we have an intrinsic understanding for what protects life, right? And if don't use the term dignity, right? This is just a cognitive or conceptual approach that sort of can be used in the academic debate against the nonsense that we're talking about here, right? But everybody actually, if they sense when are they most alive, they actually give rise to this notion of intrinsic value, of the logic of life, of dignity, right? And so all of the practices that we know of that are superior in terms of outcomes, even just in the marketplace, are rooted in non-market behaviors, right? And we talk about community, we talk about hierarchy, and all of those are actually forms of, well, they call it the grammars of human organizing, right? And so we mesh them, and the market is one piece, but it's not the only piece.
Hmm.
Without community, without hierarchy, we don't function as society, right? And hierarchy is not necessarily power abuse, it is just an order. And you talk about the right order, right? So it's an ordering system that we want to respect because it's functional.
Hmm.
So is community, and so is the market. So if you have those different pieces and those different logics, like if you are multilingual in that sense, I think people, the most successful business leaders, but organizational leaders overall, they actually align their activities with life, yeah, with the logic of life. And so it's I will say that nobody is perfect, right? This is a learning process. But
Mm.
those people that embrace that intuition of life and dignity and flourishing and well-being, they typically are more open to a conversation how much they impact others, how much they
Mm,
impact nature, because in the end, you have developed a sensibility or you have allowed yourself to stay with that sensibility that you are actually part of nature and you are actually better off when your peers are better off. You're a fundamentally social and relational being. And when you contribute to others and they contribute to you, that's sort of a reinforcing life cycle, right? And we
hmm
all know this. We all
hmm
know this. And when that is cut, then we suffer. So I think that we can do a lot better using the market.
mm. I don't know. And this is one data point, but I just sort of watch what the business culture that my kids are having to live in and their friends are having to live in. It's way worse than when you and I started. There's no question in my mind, just from my little, and it's exactly this issue. It's like people are treated like cogs in a machine worse
Mhm.
than I was. And so it seems to me we've kind of improved from the what's the famous the English Satanic Mills days for sure. But we've sort of peaked and then we're now falling back. And as the tech driven, efficiency driven, scale driven, kind of like the world's turning crazy. I think we're falling down on this on remembering what we know. I think we're I think the increased anxiety and tension and competitiveness is making this. I think we're losing ground, but that's just my opinion.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree. I just want to sort of clarify. I think what we're witnessing is not a product of the market. It's a product of the hierarchy, the oligarchy, the problems of the dominant thinking being concentrated right now in very few organizations that have
Yeah,
mind control or mind share. They have mind
right,
share. And I just
right.
want to point to that. These organizations, Facebook and all of those Silicon Valley organizations, they were pretty much humanistically organizing at the beginning. And I
Yeah,
will say that the culture that they challenged was the typical economistic Wall Street culture.
yeah,
Wall Street culture has won for now, right? But venture
yeah,
capital and all of that was actually something it needed to be in a different place, but it was
yeah,
superior. It was superior, and it still is
yeah.
superior. It
And
still
it had that creative juice flowing in it, and
Yes,
yeah,
and it had that trust building and it had this
yeah,
higher purpose. And so, slowly and surely, that dominant narrative, because we have instituted, much like you have discussed before, it's like in finance, in the power
yeah,
structure, that logic is taking over. Now, that
yeah.
virus, you can
The
combat.
finance algorithm, I call it.
Yeah, but I'm not,
Yeah,
I'm saying that that is a defective
yeah,
way
yeah,
of organizing, right? And
yeah,
we
yeah,
all know it and we all experience it and we have to adjust for it. The question is like, how do we adjust for it, right? And
yeah.
you make propositions, others are, and I think they very much align. Um,
Yeah. Where just to connect the dots for the folks here that have been suffered through my courses and stuff. Th this is the principle of empowered participation. It's another way of expressing that is a first principle of how life works. We need the parts of a system, in this case, the humans in an organization, to feel empowered to participate as their true selves in their own essence, which is not only good for poor little John who wants to feel good at work, but it's essential for the vitality and health and creativity and potential of the whole. So you end up with the same truth, but coming in through a different doorway, which I think is always reaffirming. So let's move on to the second pillar. And this one's actually I find even more interesting in terms of how you think about it versus the mainstream
mm.
happiness conversation that we're having. So talk about well-being. What is well-being?
Well, so I didn't come up with that, right? This is old thinking, and we borrow from Aristotle eudaimonia, and he makes a distinction between hedonia and eudaimonia, right? And hedonia is the short-term happiness, the Coke kind of thing. You drink happiness, yeah? That's the moment.
Hedonistic.
Hedonistic, right? Hedonistic sort of joy satisfaction in the moment that pretty much capitalism can thrive on and is. But the eudaimonic approach, of course, is sort of something more lasting, oriented and grounded in virtue and social contribution, right? And it's just basically an extension of Aristotle's thinking in a way that we are fundamentally social animals endowed with reason. And so we need to have meaning and purpose in our life, which is a source of eudaimonia and well-being. We need to have trusting relationships with others. And we need to have enough to eat and be safe, psychologically and physically, right? So if you have those 4 pointers, and I use a 4-drive theory that Paul Lawrence developed at Harvard Business School to explain human motivation through an evolutionary lens. And I think it's very powerful to understand both survival and flourishing or well-being through those kind of evolutionary lenses, because that gives you grounding in life and in science. And if you're familiar with the blue zone studies or PERMA studies or any of the happiness-oriented studies that look at what are the drivers of consistent happiness, they all sort of say the same thing. We need to have a meaningful purpose in our life, and we need to have good social relationship. If we don't, we feel lonely, and we're actually tending towards extinction, suicide, depression, all those things that take away from life. So in the
So
end, it's pretty
purpose,
purpose,
connection,
connection,
food,
acquisition,
safety.
and safety, right?
Yeah,
Yeah. And
yeah,
that safety piece is oftentimes a psychological safety. And many people
yeah,
talk about this, like how we're not feeling safe, right? But the environmental crisis is one that should give us the creeps, right? And that's
yeah.
actually a good mechanism to sort of locate action or source action in. But if we ignore it, anxiety comes bigger, right? And that's what
Yeah.
you see in the world. It's like we're an anxious bunch of people, and unfortunately, we're taking it out in unproductive ways until we turn it into productive ways.
Mm. But again, the economist's word for what you're talking about is this horrible word. I'm actually, it's my new pet peeve. I'm going to go attack inequality as a
Uh-huh.
concept because it's just this abstraction that doesn't really, I mean, where does inequality fit in with your 4 basic human needs? It's sort of everywhere and nowhere. Um, and it's the insecurity that I think is what's driving the
Mm,
political response in the United States. People feel, and rightly so, insecure about their ability to, literally feed their family. And I don't mean a small minority of, quote, poor people. I mean a majority of people.
mhm,
And we're disconnected because of all the reasons we know.
mhm,
And the destruction of dignity leaves people at work feeling like there's no purpose, and the bullshit jobs phenomenon. So it's kind of like a perfect storm. And yet I find your description of well-being dramatically different than what I read in the SDG,
oh,
well-being economy,
mm,
you know, prosperity and whatever there's like a million different
mhm.
indicators, but they're all material stuff. And then we say, well, that doesn't seem to be working, so we add a spiritual thing,
Yeah.
more goals, more checks. But what you're talking about is much more profound and simple. And why is that so different from this? There's a whole industry of well-being now but they're not singing your song.
Yes, that's probably true. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I think I'm also flabbergasted because I mean, of course, this we turn into an industry because we need it. The question is it effective?
Yeah.
And how can we make it more effective? And I think it's like many of the health approaches. You can do prevention, but it's not bringing you money, right? You can think differently, and it's not going to bring you money immediately. It's just going to make you happier. And we don't have a market established for that, right? And so that logic is in itself exclusatory. And at the same time, I think what gives me hope is people are not dumb, but they're lazy sometimes and they don't know, right? And so if you can get it out, I'll say everything that I've said, a 5-year-old can get.
Yeah.
Everything that I've said, everybody, I've not seen many people disagree with it, right? It's like, oh, it's so simple. And
But
that's
then we rush off and measure our 22 indicators of
exactly. So
happiness.
let's have 172 indicators and let's have whatever
Yeah.
artificial intelligence tell us what to do. And it's like, wow, yeah, this is the problem, that some of the things that we're talking about are too simple.
Yeah.
And they're not getting elevated in a way that's like, oh, it's sophisticated. We think we need sophistication. And sometimes that sophistication definitely helps. But I think it's this artificially produced way of scientificizing. I don't even know what kind of word there could be, but
Yeah.
that we talk about. It's like, oh my God, yeah, only then can you talk about it, right? And if you know you need others and you need a purpose to get out of bed, this is the ikigai concept, right? That's so popular now, like so many things. And then whatever, the blue zones, all of that. It's like speaking to the same truth, the same
Yeah.
evidence. And then we're sort of flabbergasted. Wow, so simple. Well, yeah.
There's actually, I went and did a holistic health retreat, and they discerned four things you need to do to stay healthy, physically healthy.
Mm,
Nutrition, exercise, sleep, and have a purpose in your life.
mm,
And they said, we have patients coming here all the time with cancer who are perfect on nutrition, perfect on sleep, perfect on exercise, but don't have and haven't had a real purpose in their life, and they still get sick.
mm.
They get cancer.
Yeah. Yeah, and life has these propensities to sort of direct us, right? And so for some people, cancer
Mm,
is the gift, is the turning point, or a disease is a turning point for reflecting,
right.
what is my purpose, right? Or isolation and depression or something is like, oh, also a potential turning point of saying, you know what? And I would debate that holistic health thing. I would say the social health is critical. Like, how do you build your relationships? How do you build your social connections that are beyond looking good, right? And I think America and
Right.
social media, that's the kind of culture where you sort of pretend to be fine and good, and you can't be authentic. And therefore, you don't authentically connect with other human beings, and therefore, you feel lonely. And that loneliness now is a disease declared by the Surgeon General. It's like, right? And Britain has a ministry of loneliness, etc. So that tells you that
Mm,
this imprint of our logic is countering the logic of life. And we can shift it, I'll say, in an optimistic way. But
mm,
that health is so evident, right? We all feel better when we are in good company. Not bad
hmm
company, right? But good company, you can say, is when you feel
Yeah.
treated as a human being. Dignity.
Yeah.
Dignity is present when people don't feel like they're better than you, or when you don't feel like you are less than, and you can connect with people and you can contribute. And when that happens, life happens, and you feel more alive, you feel better, and good things happen, like you're saying. Then we have the capacity to start solving problems that are bigger than ourselves. Then we
hmm
start engaging in things that have meaning and purpose, because that's just how our brain, our limited brain
mm,
capacity, is operating, and says, all right, well, now I have solved my problems here. I feel good. I can move to the next level.
mm.
One way to keep dominating people is to make them feel so bad, to take away their connections, to
Yeah.
take away the purpose, right? And take away the safety and maybe even the acquisition needs that you have to have. And then people are just spinning around in their own little
Mm.
universe.
But it's so it's both very hopeful and depressing that we do in the world of business in particular, but I bet you it's worse in government.
Yes.
And frankly, it's probably just as bad in academia.
Or
I
nonprofits.
mean, all over the place. So, and in our education system, our healthcare system, it's almost like it's so obvious, and yet we so often do it exactly wrong. And then we're faced with the overwhelming, how do we fix all this stuff? And we rush to come up with new metrics to measure shit when the answer is, in a sense, much simpler.
Yeah, and you can measure stuff if that's what you need, right? But you can also start sensing stuff, right? And I think
Mm,
that's really the thing. It's like, hey, if we measure stuff, we're using our cognitive brain. That's fine. That's
yeah.
good. It can be supportive, but you want to feel it too. You want to sense it, right? And you want to sort of experience it. And that's really
Mm,
what life is about, that you use all your senses in that space, and the measures can help, but they're not a
mm,
replacement of your life. Or that's where the danger of AI is sort of like, yeah, it's sort of like we're sort of giving up agency and experience of life
mm.
to algorithms again, sophisticated algorithms. They may be able to replicate life and those principles that you're also speaking about better than us right now, you
Mm,
know.
mm.
Maybe there's the hope that if
We'll
we
see.
program an AI according to regenerative principles, that maybe that can help us make better decisions if we're just relying on the cognitive. But I
Yeah.
think, yes, it is simpler, and we've never had that much education and knowledge, and we have survived, right? And so I think that gives me hope is that we are actually designed for survival, or life is staying around. Maybe we aren't until we get our act together. And
Mm.
yeah.
Other than our mutual friend Frank, have you found any finance professors who buy into this?
No, and I have to say I haven't actively been looking because it's been too depressing, I'll say. I don't necessarily know.
Yeah.
Um, I
Yeah.
there's a bet on the next generation, but we really need to set that up. And
Yeah.
I think the best you can get is everybody that is even just barely looking for superior results, they will come back to the conclusion that a humanistic approach is better, right? And that's
Yeah.
why Larry Fink and others are sort of putting out like, yeah, if they're not under political pressure, it's like, hey, you know what? Returns are better when you follow this humanistic model, right? He doesn't call it that.
Larry Fink is saying that?
Yeah, in his letters since 2018, he
Oh, yeah.
basically admonished everybody, hey, you got to have a purpose.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
got to
Purpose.
have, yeah, you got to respect the planetary boundaries and all of that stuff. So he's
Yeah.
making the same argument, but from a profitability perspective, saying, hey, you know
Yeah.
what? Just it is performing better when people want to be at work, when people are engaged at work, when your customers actually like what you're doing, when they understand that you stand for something bigger than just profitability, right? And all
Mm.
of the evidence is out there. So even if the finance professors, the finance profession, like doesn't get it, like even just pursuing more profit, you would come to the same conclusion, right?
Yeah.
The only distinction is short term, long term. And I think there's a lot of mindless people in finance, no offense, right? But I mean
Mm.
that's the problem. It's not like the financial rules play in our favor when you put the long term perspective in.
Yeah. If you get to the long term. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. I won't comment on Larry Fink's how serious he is about it, but
I'm no, no, no. I'm not saying he's
that's a
serious.
separate conversation.
That's a
I'm
separate conversation.
also, yeah, I'm looking at Lauren there, who's working on a project on the global aid industry, and again the story of we've assumed that if we deliver food in a we know better hierarchical top-down way, even if it's you know linked to our political objectives, that we're going to create prosperity in the world, and this could be a brilliant framework to rethink the entire global aid paradigm. And same for the philanthropy paradigm.
Yeah.
Same story, right?
Yeah, and I would say like the NGO, like this division of labor that we have created is not very functional, right? It's compensatory. And the logic is here's the for-profit and here's the not-for-profit sector. It's like it's just defined through a legal separation that
Yeah.
you don't have to pay taxes. But at the core, it's the same design. It's the same design of utility maximizing
Yeah.
individuals, right? And it's like,
Yeah.
oh, okay, then we're surprised that we're getting these inferior social results because we're just designing with the wrong
Yeah.
set
I
of.
tell you a quick anecdote. Yesterday I had a coffee with a local friend here who runs a sort of a farm education program. It's a great, farm to table food, teaching kids about food and all of the things that come with it. And she's got a board member who keeps referring to her work as a charity, like, oh, this is a nice charity. And she said it just bugs me to hear that word used because it's kind of like a very, nice little girl, nice little project,
And
inferior. I've
dignifying.
got the money and you're my charity case, kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, it doesn't have the dignity, right? And so he's sort of
Exactly.
rebelling against that. Listen, you're not taking me seriously,
Right.
and this is inherently valuable. This is just sort of like a side thing.
Yeah.
And I think that's where much of the frustration is. Like
Yeah.
if you want to locate frustration in self and others, it can most of the time be traced back to people not feeling seen and heard or valued as a human being, right? And the whole
Yeah.
aid conversation, the whole charity conversation, all of that is just like, oh my God, we're creating dependence so that we feel better, maybe
Right.
superficially,
Yeah.
but it's not dignified.
Let's open this up, bring in some other voices. I We have like 10 minutes to go, and I actually have a hard stop today. So I normally impose on our guests to hang around an extra 5 minutes, but I'll have to jump off on the hour today. So any reflections or questions or additions to the conversation that people want to make? Yeah, Sharon, how are you?
I'm fighting a cold, but I'm okay. Thank you.
Oh,
Yeah, I missed a few minutes of the conversation, so you may have spoken to this, but I'm very concerned about AI, and how do we, I mean, it seems to me like we're kind of in a battle, like this huge battle for which way we're going to go in this society, because what AI, these AI oligarchs want to replace humans and really don't care what happens to us once we lose so many of our jobs. I can tell you in my field, jobs have already been lost, and it's getting harder and harder. So we what we want to do in a humanistic type of work is to really make it meaningful and to really upgrade it a lot. I'm not finding my words right now, but I think you get my meaning. And how do we deal with what AI is trying to do, which seems to be the absolute opposite? Thank you.
Mm. I mean,
fix AI in one or two sentences.
okay, well, very quick reflections. We need to play defense, right? And I think other people put it in place. Right now, we have created a system of basically sociopaths and psychopaths, the Homo economicus in power. So they will not, you shouldn't trust them, right? They will abuse it, that's for sure. So we shouldn't be surprised and hopeful that they will use it well. So that needs to be sort of taken care of. That as number one, just done, right? Easy, easy. Second piece is AI can be a gift, right? It can be a gift to actually think about human intelligence and absolute intelligence, or how do we relate with the tools and how do we make it a tool? But that's sort of a standard conversation that we've had with every tool, including finance that came around, that where we are not really clear and mindful and using it powerfully as a tool to advance our goals. Why? Because we don't really have clarity of what our goal is.
Mm.
Right? If we say we want more, that's the economistic approach, then yes, we're just going to have these algorithms take care of wanting more. But if we want better, I think we have a different conversation, right? And that's where the well-being, happiness, eudaimonia comes in. Like, how do you want AI to support your key drivers of well-being?
Mm.
That could be your health, that could be your acquisition, that could be your safety, that could be your meaning and purpose. And I think what Sharon, what you're talking about is like this development forces us to think about meaningful work. So it could be a gift. It's like, what is it? And there's so much opportunity, right? This is where I'm sort of like stuck. People are like afraid of doing work or losing work. There's so much work to do. we haven't structured it necessarily that it can be paid, but that's another kind of problem that we can solve. And AI and other mechanisms can actually help with that if we wanted to. Like if
Mm.
everybody puts information in AI, why not pay for the information that you put in AI as a rent of some sort, right? I mean, like those,
There's a concept.
yeah,
AI as a commons,
yes,
or the information as a commons, the
right.
knowledge as a commons,
Yeah.
May
and the
I
internet.
may I add one quick follow-up?
Sure.
If we can solve the environmental problem of the massive amounts of energy and water that AI is sucking up,
Of course.
otherwise I don't see how it can possibly be a positive. And we're fighting um, Amazon AI data centers being built here in Washington State, and they're trying to build 12 nuclear reactors to power their AI data centers and have the taxpayers pay for it. And that power doesn't go to the taxpayers because they can't afford it. Okay, thanks.
Mm. Other reflections. We can't solve AI today. Believe me. It's terrifying. You've silenced the crowd, Michael.
Oh, that's not a good sign.
No, it's a good sign. It's a good sign.
I wasn't able to raise my hand quickly, but I do have a question.
Good. Hi, Jordan.
Fantastic. Hi. Hey, John. Hey, Michael. Thanks for such a robust discussion. So I particularly resonated about the example you shared where your friend or partner felt that from an investment perspective, that her business was being viewed as a charity, right? That
Mm,
dignity wasn't really honored here. And it's quite interesting because I feel like that energy of frustration will just bring back more frustration. So, this is a little bit more of an abstract question, but I suppose what are some tools and ways that are successful in really gaining that authority and helping to reshape that paradigm and that initial perspective of being viewed as, the old model and kind of staying in a particular lane of just
mm.
being a handout versus really standing in that authority of helping to create change that's reflective of a regenerative model.
Yeah, great question. Michael, do you have a,
Yeah, I mean, I have some reflections, but I'm sure you do too, and many others here
yeah.
as well. Thank you, Jordan. I think one of the key things is, which I find surprising and it's like actually empowering, dignity is inherent in you. It's different from respect, so you don't need to wait for somebody else to give it to you. So in the conversation where somebody feels not
Mm,
dignified, it's actually they're not feeling respected or seen and heard. But what we often tend to do is we get frustrated because we expect it from somebody else, when actually the practice is how can I source it in me, right?
mm.
How can I source it in me and respect it in me? And maybe you can actually phrase it and build confidence that, hey, you're not necessarily value creating the same way that this other person is, but you're value protecting and you're creating more value by whatever the charity is doing, right? This is actually superior value if you need that kind of affirmation for yourself. But value protection and first that presumes value recognition, right? Are actually totally neglected. That's why somebody who's in business can say, all right, we're just little our pet charity that we're sort of funding because our way of value creation by giving you handouts is better than yours protecting whatever it is that you're protecting, right? And I think that's just sort of a way of how we think about it, how others are thinking about it, understanding with grace that others are basically part of this paradigm. They swim in that water. They have no ability to reflect on it the way that maybe you have had or others people in this community have had. And so that could be empowering as a practice, just like, okay, this is what's going on over there. And it's not diminishing you unless you let it diminish you.
Mm. Gee, I told you he's philosophical. No, that was
That's actually
beautiful.
more spiritual. That is like
Yeah,
that's
it's more
more
spiritual. Yeah. No,
ancient
that was
wisdom.
a beautiful
Yeah.
response. I might just add, the part I didn't share, which is probably self-evident, is that the woman who used the term charity is one of the major donors sitting on the board. And so there's this energy and threat that's part of the challenge. And I asked my friend, why didn't you just say something that you'd prefer not to be called a charity, and explain why? And she didn't really answer it, but I knew what the answer was, which was, if she loses a donor, it's a problem because she's struggling to keep her head above water. So it kind of brings us into the whole conversation about the energy of money when it shows up. Just by showing up, it creates a dissonance, and we're actually exploring early days, exploring this idea of the need to create coherence to manage I'll call it the social entropy, the chaos. And the best response to that is investing in coherence. And when money shows up, it often damages the coherence because of this power over dynamic. So it's a really complicated struggle. But I think, Michael, you nailed it when you said, well, two things. One, that we have to have a different paradigm, that there's something other than government services and the market to create a viable civilization. And it needs to be valued not as charity, but as just different forms of work and whatnot. And that's a much bigger challenge. But I hadn't, I mean, the way ultimately we all decide for ourselves to insist we have dignity, even if other people don't acknowledge it. And that's a lesson for me all the time, because I'm like all of us, frustrated that I've got all these ideas and I can't get airtime because the knuckleheads get all the airtime. And so that was a nice reminder for all of us, I think, Michael.
Yeah,
Well,
and
listen,
but that's where this practice is a practice, right? This is something that everybody can do right now. Like once we do this, we take away some of the power from the psychopaths and some of the power from those people that are just not even aware, right?
yeah,
And I'm sure that that person with the charity thing, if you have
100%.
with her,
Yeah,
she'll get it. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
But
I'm
you
sure
can
it
make
doesn't even
her
occur to
wrong.
her that there's something wrong with the word charity.
Yeah, well, exactly. And I mean, the thing is that we oftentimes lapse into when we are frustrated, we actually undignify the other person by attacking them. And then you have a non-productive conversation, in which typically conflict. And by the way, if anybody interested in the dignity work more, Donna Hicks from the international conflict domain has written much about it, where it's like, this is the source. When we feel our dignity is violated or threatened, then we start lashing out. And that's what you have, what we see everywhere, right?
Yeah.
And you're the source of actually putting that into a productive kind of conflict and conversation by honoring your dignity and the dignity of others in a way that you can have a
Yeah.
conversation about, for example, that charity term or something else.
Which then, extends all the way to the north-south conversations, the developed, undeveloped conversations, the blah, blah. I mean, just
Yeah,
you've got a lifetime of customers waiting for you, Michael,
that's true.
for
It's a
your thinking.
need, but it's not a want yet.
Yeah. Yeah. At least one that pays for it. Well,
Yeah.
listen, thank you so much. This was great. Obviously just opening the door to a much richer conversation. To find your work, Michael, just give us a quick reminder.
Humanistic management, humanistic leadership. If you Google it, there are several books out. There's lots of books and scientific kind of work. We have a website, humanisticleadership.institute, where you have documentary films that won awards and have other famous people involved, if that's what is helpful, but gives more of a short sense of what we're talking about. And then there's a Humanistic Leadership Academy for those that are interested in sort of getting more exposure to that, and the Humanistic Management Association. So there are lots of bits and pieces floating around.
We're going to have to create a course for the With Life community on humanistic management. In our language, we think of management as basically decision making. How do we make decisions? And therefore, it applies to literally everything that
Yeah,
humans do.
exactly.
So we'll explore that one next. Quick commercial reminder. We've got a investment course starting next week, and a leadership course starting next week. And Jack maybe will remind me what else is starting next week, but go to the either Capital Institute website or the withlife.net website to find out what's happening. Lots of things starting up in February. Did I miss anything, Jack?
We have investment starting on Monday and then lead thriving teams. We also have a With Life live session with someone named Lynn. That's on Tuesday. So we have a few different events going on next week as well as courses. Be sure to check it out on the community platform.
Great. And Michael, when we'll start playing, we'll close with your song and just tell us what it was. It was beautiful.
Honestly, it is a French song that came through to my playlist on Spotify at one point, and my kids like
Ah,
it, and I like it, and I think the translation is that we are free, and so I like
that's
it because the spirit and the experience of listening to the song gives me juice, gives me hope, energy, and I think we need to recapture that word freedom
yeah,
from.
freedom. 100%. I was just thinking about this the other day. Freedom, agency.
Yeah.
Uh, absolutely. Here's to freedom. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you,
To
John.
be
Thank you,
continued.
everybody.
Thanks, everyone.